She didn't even look up. That was the part Marin Whitlock would never forget, not the scene itself, not the half-open door, not the sound of laughter cutting through the rain-soaked silence of the penthouse. What broke something permanent inside her chest was the moment Sabine Corvell finally turned and looked at her 7 months pregnant, standing in her own doorway, and felt absolutely nothing. No shame, no panic, just a slow, almost bored sweep of her eyes downward to Marin's belly, and then back up, like she was appraising furniture she'd already decided wasn't worth keeping. "You should probably go," Sabine said, calm, almost gentle. "This isn't really your space anymore." If that were you standing in your own home, carrying your child, hearing those words, what would you do?
Before we go any further, if you've never watched one of our stories before,
Hit that subscribe button right now and turn on your notifications. Stories like this one don't come around often, and we drop new ones every week. Once you're in, drop a comment and tell me what city or country you're watching from. I genuinely want to see how far this story travels. And if it hits you the way I think it will hit that like button, it costs you nothing, and it means everything to us. Now, let's go back to that doorway. The phone was a cheap excuse, and Marin knew it, even as she drove back through the October rain. She had the newer model in her bag, the one Cassian had bought her in August, because he said the old screens was too small for a pregnant woman's tired eyes. But she'd left her personal phone, the cracked one she still used for the literacy program contacts, sitting on the kitchen counter that morning. Or at least she thought she had. Her memory had been foggy all week, the kind of foggy that comes from not sleeping well, from carrying 32 extra pounds on a body that hadn't asked for the assignment, from living for 18 months inside a marriage that was slowly learning how to keep secrets. The parking garage of their building was quiet at that hour. Marin had been at the community center until almost 9, reading with the after-school group that stayed late because some of them didn't particularly want to go home. She understood that more than she used to. She pulled into her assigned space, killed the engine, and sat there for a moment with both hands still on the wheel, listening to the rain hit the concrete above her. She was tired in a way sleep couldn't fix. She took the elevator up. She didn't call ahead. They'd been married 3 years. You don't call ahead when you forget something in your own kitchen. Penthouse was quiet when she stepped in. Not the silence of an empty apartment. A different kind, the kind that has shape to it, that seems to be holding its breath. The lamp in the entryway was on, but the main lights were low, the way Cassian liked them when he was unwinding after a long night. His jacket was draped over the chair by the door. His shoes were placed too carefully beside it, like someone had been deliberate about something. Marin noticed this without knowing why she noticed it. Pregnant women develop a strange radar, or maybe wives do. She moved toward the kitchen, and then she heard the laughter. Not loud. Not the kind of laughter you'd call scandalous. It was soft and private and low, the kind that belongs to two people sharing something they've shared before. The kind you can't mistake for a television. Marin stopped walking. Later, she would spend a long time trying to understand why she didn't turn around right then. Why she didn't take the phone, which she could see from where she stood, sitting right there on the kitchen counter, just as she'd thought, and simply leave. Why some part of her brain made her feet keep moving toward the bedroom instead of toward the elevator. Door was half open. She pushed it the rest of the way. What she found was not what the movies prepare you for. There was no dramatic tableau of bodies tangled together. Cassian was standing near the window in his dress shirt, collar open, holding a glass. Sabasi was sitting on the edge of the bed, her jacket folded across her lap, her heels placed neatly beside her feet. They were talking low, close, the kind of conversation that fills up space between two people who know each other very well. They both went still when the door opened. Marin stood there. Cassian put the glass down. Marin, she wasn't looking at him. She was looking at Sabine, because Sabine was the one who wasn't reacting the way a person should react when caught doing something wrong. There was no flicker of guilt, no reaching for her jacket, no pulling herself away from the edge of the bed. Sabine Corvell just looked at Marin out of her face, then slowly, deliberately, down at the stomach that was impossible to miss, and then she exhaled through her nose, like someone who'd been interrupted in a meeting. You should probably go, Sabine said. This isn't really your space anymore. Cassian's jaw moved. No sound came out. Marin felt something shift in her chest that she would later try to describe, and never quite manage. It wasn't rage. It wasn't devastation. It was something quieter and more final than either of those things. It was the particular feeling of a door closing from the inside. Marin. Cassian stepped toward her. I can explain. She came back for a phone, Sabine said, glancing at the kitchen doorway. The one on the counter, I assume. She said it like she'd been living there long enough to know the layout. She said it like the information was boring. That detail, that specific, unhurried detail, went through Marin like a blade. Get out of my bedroom, Marin said. She wasn't sure afterward which of them she was speaking to. Sabine looked at her with something that was almost pity. Mrs. Rourke. She stood up, took her jacket from her lap, and began unhurrying pulling it on. Cassian's world isn't. She paused, choosing her words with the care of someone who has already chosen them many times before. It's not built for what you do. You read books to children. That's lovely. She smoothed the front of her jacket. But a man like your husband doesn't need lovely. He needs someone who can stand in the room and not flinch. Sabine. Cassian's voice dropped to something cold and low. Stop, Sabine glanced at him. She deserves the truth. Stop talking. She's been unhappy for a year. We both know that. I said stop. The silence that followed had a temperature to it. Marin was aware of her own breathing steady, which surprised her. She was aware of the rain on the windows. She was aware of the weight of the baby pressing against her ribs, the small shift of movement that happened every time. She stood still too long. She turned around and walked back to the kitchen. She picked up the phone from the counter. She walked to the elevator and pressed the button. Cassian came after her. Of course he did. He appeared in the hallway with his collar still open, and his eyes doing something she hadn't seen them do before, something almost frightened, though that wasn't a word that belonged in the same sentence as Cassian Rourke, and both of them knew it. He was a man whose name preceded him into rooms. He had built something from almost nothing and made it untouchable, and the people who worked for him were careful in ways that went beyond professional courtesies. He didn't get frightened. He got controlled. Right now he looked like control was costing him something. Marin, please don't do this in the elevator. I'm not doing anything in the elevator, she said. I'm leaving. We need to talk. Not tent. Then tell me where you're going. She looked at him. She had loved this man. She had chosen him over a sister who warned her, over a mother who went quiet in a particular way whenever his name came up, over every practical instinct she'd spent her adult life developing. She had chosen him so completely that by the time the doubts started, they felt like betrayals of something sacred. I'm going somewhere safe, she said. You are safe. Let me, Cassian. Her voice came out flat and precise in a way she hadn't planned. You have a woman in our bedroom who just told me I don't belong in my own home. And you want to explain that. He opened his mouth. The elevator doors opened. She stepped in. He put his hand against the doorframe, not blocking her, not grabbing her, just placing his palm flat against the metal, like he could hold the moment still if he just kept contact with something. Marin. She looked at him one more time. She memorized the expression on his face because some part of her already understood that this was the last time she'd see it this way. This raw, this stripped of all the armor he usually kept fitted so carefully in place. Take care of yourself, she said, and the doors closed. The drive to Talia's house took 40 minutes in the rain. Marin didn't cry. She tried once. Somewhere around the bridge felt the pressure behind her eyes that usually meant tears were coming, but nothing came. She just drove, both hands on the wheel, wipers going, baby pressing steadily against her left side, like a reminder that she was not the only person inside her body anymore. Talia Whitlock lived in a narrow house on a quiet street near the university, the kind of street where the trees were old enough to arch over the road. She'd bought it 5 years ago, when her law practice started doing well, and she'd done almost nothing to decorate it, because she worked 70 hours a week and hadn't gotten around to caring. The front light was off. It was almost 10 o'clock. Marin sat in the car in front of the house for a long time. 8 months. That was how long she and Talia had barely spoken. Not a dramatic falling out. There was no screaming, no ultimatum delivered in a restaurant. Just a conversation that had gone too honest, the way conversations with Talia always eventually did, and Marin saying something cold and final about minding her own business, and Talia going quiet, with the specific quiet of someone who has run out of ways to help. She'd sent gifts when the pregnancy was announced. Card. A text that Marin hadn't answered for 3 days, and then answered with something polite that communicated nothing. She hadn't known, until this exact moment, how much she'd been ashamed of herself for that. She got out of the car. She walked up to the front door. She knocked. The light in the front window came on. Then footsteps. Then a long pause. Talia, looking through the peephole probably, because Talia was a lawyer and had learned to be careful in the same way that other people learn to be careful from different teachers. The door opened. Talia was in pajamas, her reading glasses still pushed up on her head, her hair half loose from a braid she'd clearly been taking out before bed. She took one look at Marin, soaked from the short walk between the car and the door, hands wrapped around her phone, belly enormous, face doing absolutely nothing, and she did not say, "I told you so." She did not say anything at all. She just stepped back from the doorway and held the door open wider. That gesture, more than anything that had happened that night, was what finally made Marin's eyes burn. She walked inside. Talia brought her a towel without asking. Brought her tea without asking, the specific kind Marin had drunk obsessively in her first trimester when everything else made her nauseous, which meant Talia had bought it at some point during the 8 months they barely spoke and kept it in her cabinet. Saren sat at the kitchen table and pressed both hands around the mug and stared at the grain of the wood until her breathing steadied. "How bad?" Talia asked. She sat down across from her and didn't pretend to already know. "I don't know yet," Marin said. "I just know I'm not going back." Talia nodded once, not surprised, not relieved, at least not visibly. Just accepting the information with the same precision she accepted information in a courtroom. "Okay," she said. "I'm sorry about... We're not doing that tonight." Talia shook her head. "Tonight you drink that tea, and we figure out where you're sleeping." Marin almost laughed. It came out as something half-choked. "I'm sorry I was such an idiot." "You weren't an idiot." Talia picked up her own mug. "You were in love with someone and you wanted it to work. That's not idiotic. That's just human. You warned me." "I did." Talia didn't deny it, because Talia never softened things out of politeness. "And you weren't ready to hear it, and now you are. So here you are." She paused. "Here you both are," she added, glancing down at the table, meaning the baby, and something about the plainness of that acknowledgement. "Here you both are," made Marin's chest do something complicated that she couldn't name. She sat there in her sister's kitchen while the rain kept hitting the windows, and somewhere across the city, a man who had once been the most powerful thing in her world was standing in a penthouse, not knowing what to do with his hands. She thought about Sabine's face, that particular absence of guilt, the deliberate sweep of her eyes down to the belly. She thought about the words, "This isn't really your space anymore." And she thought about how the thing that haunted her wasn't the betrayal itself, or not only that. It was that Sabine had said it like it was already established fact. Like the transfer of ownership had already happened, and Marin just hadn't received the paperwork. She had walked into her own home and been made to feel like a visitor. That, she thought, sitting in her sister's kitchen with her hands wrapped around a mug of chamomile tea, was the thing she was never going to forget. And it was the thing that was going to be very useful to her. Because Marin Whitlock had spent her adult life helping children fall in love with words, with sentences, with the peculiar power of a story told right. She understood more than most people realized that the person who controls the narrative controls the room. She had just walked out of a room that someone else had been narrating for her. It was, she decided, somewhere around midnight, the last time she was going to let that happen. She finished her tea. She let Talia show her to the guest room. And somewhere between lying down on the unfamiliar mattress and closing her eyes, she made herself a quiet, very ordinary promise. Whatever came next, she would be the one who decided it. She fell asleep to the sound of the rain. She did not dream about Cassian. She dreamed about nothing at all, which was the deepest sleep she'd had in months. She woke up at 5:47 in the morning, and for exactly 3 seconds, she didn't remember where she was. Then it came back, all of it, at once. Talia's guest room. The rain, which had stopped sometime in the night. The smell of old wood and laundry detergent, and the particular staleness of a room that doesn't get used often. The baby, pressing against her bladder, with the consistency and mercy of a small demolition crew. Marin lay there on her back, staring at the ceiling, and let the previous night reassemble itself piece by piece. The phone on the counter, the laughter, the half-open door. Sabine's face, that face, with its absolute absence of scrambling, its cool assessment of Marin's belly, like a contractor measuring square footage. This isn't really your space anymore. She put both hands flat on her stomach and felt the baby shift in response. Yeah, she said, to no one. I know. She got up carefully. The way you move when your center of gravity has become a negotiation, and padded to the bathroom. The face in the mirror looked like someone who had slept but not rested. Eyes flat. Jaw set with the particular tension of a person who has made a decision in the dark and is now in the process of making sure the daylight doesn't undo it. She looked at herself for a long moment. Then she washed her face with cold water and went to find her sister. Talia was already at the kitchen table, with her laptop open, and 2 mugs of coffee going, which said something about Talia that she'd gotten up early and prepared for a conversation that might be hard, and she'd done it without being asked, and without making a production of it. She looked up when Marin came in. Sit down, she said. I need to call. Sit down first. Marin sat. Talia pushed one of the mugs toward her, then remembered and pulled it back and replaced it with a glass of orange juice from the refrigerator without breaking stride. She sat back down across from her sister and looked at her with the expression she usually reserved for cases that had gotten complicated in ways that were going to require a lot of careful work. Tell me everything, Talia said. Not what you think I need to know. Everything. So Marin told her. It took almost an hour. She started with last night and then went backward, because that was the only way to make it make senses, the months of small distances that had accumulated between her and Cassian like sediment, the way his security people had started shadowing her without being introduced, the way certain conversations would stop when she entered a room, the way Cassian had looked at her sometimes with something she'd read as protectiveness, and Dom was now reconsidering. Talia listened without interrupting, which required visible effort from someone who interrupted for a living. When Marin finished, Talia sat back in her chair and was quiet for a moment with her coffee mug in both hands. Okay, she said. Okay, what? Okay, I'm going to call Gideon Shaw this morning. Marin knew the name. Family Law. One of the best in the state by Talia's account, and Talia did not hand out that designation casually. You think it's already there? Divorce? Talia looked at her steadily. Is it? Marin thought about Cassian's hand flat against the elevator doorframe. The look on his face, the genuine naked something in his eyes that she hadn't seen there in a long time. Yes, she said, it's already there. Then I'm calling Gideon. Talia made the call at 8:30, while Marin sat on the couch with a piece of toast she was eating out of obligation rather than appetite. The conversation was short and professional, and when Talia hung up, she came back into the living room with her tablet already open and her reading glasses back on her head. You can see us at noon, she said. That fast? He owes me a favor. Talia sat down beside her. Marin. Before we go in there, I need you to think carefully about something. I'm thinking carefully about everything right now. Cassian's business. Talia kept her voice level. How much do you actually know about his finances? Question landed with weight, because the honest answer was, not enough. She'd told herself for years that the parts of Cassian's life she didn't have full access to were simply the nature of the work he ran, several legitimate development companies, import operations, a private security firm. These were the things she could see and name. What happened underneath those structures was something she had chosen, with careful deliberateness, not to examine too closely. Some, she said. Is any of it in your name? A joint account. The penthouse is held jointly. Anything else? I don't know. Talia took her glasses off her head and turned them over in her hands, which was what she did when she was organizing information into priorities. That's what I was afraid of. What does that mean? It means that if Cassian decides to complicate things, we need to know what's there before he moves it. Marin felt something cold settle behind her sternum. He wouldn't. I'm not saying he would. Talia put her glasses back. I'm saying we need to know before we find out. They went to see Gideon Shaw at noon. He was a small, precise man in his 60s, with a gray beard, and the kind of quiet that commands rooms without performing anything. His office was on the 14th floor of a building downtown, with a view of the Sound that he never seemed to look at. He had a yellow legal pad and a fountain pen, and he listened to Marin the way Talia had listened, without interruption, without visible reaction, and when she finished, he wrote 3 lines on his pad in handwriting too small to read from across the desk. "Mrs. Rourke," he said, "has your husband ever made you feel physically unsafe?" "No." "Any threats, explicit or implied, against you or the child?" "No. Nothing like that." Gideon nodded slowly. "And you're certain you want to file?" "Yes." He turned to Talia. "We'll need a full financial disclosure. She should not be present in the shared residence when we serve." "She won't be going back," Talia said. "Good." He put the pen down. "There's something else I want you to be prepared for." He laced his fingers together on the desk. "Men in Mr. Rourke's position, men with significant assets and significant exposure, they don't always respond to divorce proceedings the way ordinary clients do. The leverage available to them is different." Marin kept her voice even. "Define different." "They have access to information. About you, about your routines, your finances, your associations. They also have access to people who can make the legal process slower and more difficult than it needs to be." He held her gaze. "I'm not trying to frighten you. I'm telling you what this sometimes looks like, so you won't be surprised." "I'm not going to be frightened into going back," Marin said. "No," Gideon said. "I can see that." Something shifted slightly in his expression. Not a smile, more like the microscopic adjustment of someone who has just recalculated their expectations. "Then let's get started." They were there for 2 hours. When they came out into the afternoon, the sky had cleared, and the city looked sharp-edged and freshly washed. Marin stood on the sidewalk and felt the cold air hit her face and breathed it in. "You okay?" Talia asked. "Ask me again in an hour." Talia's phone rang. She glanced at the screen, frowned, and answered it. Marin watched her sister's face change that particular attorney shift, where the expression goes neutral and the eyes go sharp at the same time. "When?" Talia said. "Then, how sure?" Then a long pause, where she wasn't saying anything and whatever was being said was making the line of her jaw tighter. "Okay, don't send it by email. Bring it in person." She hung up. Marin waited. "That was a contact at a financial forensics firm," Talia said carefully. "Someone I called this morning before we went in." She looked at Marin directly. "They found something." "What kind of something?" "A trust. Established 18 months ago, funded in increments, legally protected, and not in Cassian's name." She paused. "It's in Lero's name." Marin went very still. "That's not," she stopped. "We didn't have a name yet, 18 months ago." "I know. We didn't even know the sex. The trust was filed under a placeholder. The name was updated 4 months ago." Talia held her gaze. "Marin, he set up financial protection for the baby before you were far enough along to know the gender." The sidewalk felt very solid under her feet, in a way sidewalks usually don't make themselves felt. "Why would he do that without telling me?" Talia's silence was its own answer. "He knew something," Marin said slowly. "That's what I need to find out." They went back inside. The forensics contact, a woman named Priya Vargas, who had sharp eyes and moved like someone who expected to be underestimated, brought 2 printed files and a flash drive and laid them on Talia's dining room table that evening without preamble. "The trust is clean," she said, meaning legally clean. "Whoever set it up knew what they were doing. It's structured so it can't be touched in a divorce proceeding, ceasing it belongs to the child. Full stop." "When was the decision made to fund it?" Talia asked. Priya opened the first file. "First transfer was 22 months ago. Small amount, probably testing the structure. Then it grew significantly. She pointed to a row of figures. This bracket here, about 14 months ago, someone put in a significant sum very quickly, like they were in a hurry. Marin leaned forward. What happened 14 months ago? Priya glanced at Talia. Tell her, Talia said. We pulled some intelligence records. I have a contact who works adjacent to some federal organized crime monitoring. She said it neutrally, the way you discuss something, that is what it is. 14 months ago, there was chatter, that's the word they use, chatter in a rival criminal network about Cassian Rourke's family, specifically about the value of targeting his heir. The room went quiet. His heir, Marin repeated. Her voice came out flat. I was pregnant. 7 weeks, Priya confirmed. You likely didn't know yet. Cassian knew. It appears so. Marin sat back in her chair. Could feel her heartbeat in her temples now, the particular pulse of something enormous moving through her body and not having anywhere to go yet. Cassian had known she was pregnant before she had, or at the same moment. And instead of telling her that knowledge, instead of sitting down across from her at the kitchen table and saying there are people who might want to hurt you because of what I am, he built a financial fortress around the baby, she said. And then he assigned a security detail to me. You noticed the protection? Priya asked, not unkindly. I thought it was just how he operated. He increased your coverage significantly around that time. 3 additional personnel. He never told me. No. The silence in the room had a different quality now. Not the silence of shock, was past shock, she realized. Had moved through it sometime in the last 24 hours and come out the other side into something that was harder and colder and more functional. This was the silence of understanding arriving at full size. He decided to protect me, she said, slowly, by controlling everything around me without telling me it needed controlling. Because if he told me it needed controlling, I'd know what kind of danger I was actually in. Nobody disagreed, and he thought that was love, she said. Talia, who had been quiet through most of this, spoke carefully. I think he thought he was doing what he did with every other problem in his life. Managing it, containing it. Marin looked at the figures on the table. The trust amounts, the dates, the neat columns of a secret, kept so carefully it had its own legal structure. Get me Gideon on the phone, she said. Marin, get me Gideon. I want to file tomorrow. The filing happened the next morning. Cassian received the papers at the penthouse at 11:15 on a Wednesday. Marin knew this because Talia's process server sent confirmation, and Marin was in Celia's kitchen eating scrambled eggs. She didn't particularly want when the timestamp came through on Talia's phone. She waited for the call. It came in 4 minutes. She let it go to voicemail. He called back immediately. She let that one go too. The third call she answered, because the fourth call would have been a person showing up at the door. She was trying to avoid a scene in her sister's driveway. I got the papers, Cassian said. His voice was completely controlled, which told her more than any amount of yelling would have. I know. You didn't have to do it this way. There wasn't another way, she said. That's kind of the point. A pause. The particular kind of pause that comes from someone measuring what they can afford to say. I want to see you. Not to argue. I just want... Cassian. She kept her voice even. I know about the trust. Silence. I know about the intelligence chatter 14 months ago. I know you found out I was pregnant and your first response was to build financial protection for a baby we hadn't even named yet. And your second response was to add 3 people to my security detail without telling me they were there. She waited. You want to tell me what your third response was? Keep you safe. His voice had dropped, gone rough at the edges. That was the only response. There was no other. You decided what I needed to know, she said. You decided what I could handle. You built walls around me and didn't tell me. The walls were there and called it love. There were people who wanted to use you to get to me. I know that now. If you'd known then I could have made an informed choice about what kind of life I was living. Her voice stayed level. That's the part you keep missing, Cassian. The choice. You took it away. I was trying to protect you. I know you were. And she did know it. That was the complicated part, the part that she was going to have to hold carefully for a long time. He had not been performing love. He had genuinely, in the language available to him, been loving her. But protection without consent is still control, and I am done being controlled. Another silence, longer this time. He started. Is going to have a father who shows up, she said. That's what I want for her. Not a fortress. A father who actually shows up. Can you do that? No answer for a moment. I'm trying to figure out what I can do, he said. It was the most honest thing she'd heard him say in months. Maybe longer. Start there, she said, and she hung up. She put the phone face down on the table. She sat very still for a moment. Then she picked up her fork and finished her eggs. She was halfway through them when Talia came in from the hallway, moving fast, which was not how Talia moved. Talia moved like a person who had always arrived at the exact time she intended to arrive. Fast meant something had changed. What? Marin said immediately. Priya just called. Talia had her phone in her hand. Sabine Corvell is missing. Marin put the fork down. Missing how? Her apartment has been cleared, not packed cleared. Her car is in the parking garage. She hasn't been seen since Tuesday night. The night before Marin had walked into the penthouse. She disappeared the same night, Marin said. Before you got there based on the timeline. Talia sat down. Which means she was gone before Cassian knew you'd seen them. So we don't know what he did or didn't do. Talia's voice was careful. But there's something else. The recruitment agency that placed Sabine at Cassian's company. Priya ran it. And? It's not what it says it is. Talia set her phone on the table between them. The agency is a shell. Its actual ownership traces back through 4 holding companies to a private equity structure controlled by a man named Lucian Kessero. The name meant nothing to Marin. Who is he? She asked. According to Federal Intelligence Monitoring, which Priya accessed through her contact Lucian Kessero, is the strategic director behind the largest rival criminal organization to Cassian's. The one that's been trying to destabilize his operation for the past 3 years. Talia held her gaze. Sabine Corvell was placed inside Cassian's company by his enemy. Marin sat with that. The kitchen felt very quiet. She was a plant, Marin said. Originally for corporate intelligence, access to Cassian's business operations, financial structure, security protocols. Talia kept her voice steady, methodical, like she was building an argument. But that apparently wasn't enough, so they escalated. The theory, and this is still theory, Priya doesn't have confirmation yet, is that when the corporate espionage stopped producing results, Kessero changed the strategy. The goal became personal destabilization, destroy the marriage, create vulnerability. Marin felt something shift in her chest. Not quite what she would have predicted. Not sympathy. Not yet, she wasn't ready for that. But something cold and structural, like the feeling of a building settling. Sabine was ordered to have an affair with my husband, she said. It looks that way. And the bedroom. We don't know yet how much of it was engineered. Talia paused. But we're going to find out. The word engineered sat in the air between them. Marin thought about Sabine's face again. That deliberate calm. The specific cruelty of the words. You read books to children. That's lovely. The way they had landed with surgical precision on every insecurity Marin had ever quietly carried about whether her world was too small for the man she'd married. She knew what to say, Marin said slowly. What? Sabine. She knew exactly what to say to make me leave immediately. The thing about the literacy program. The thing about not being strong enough for his world. Her jaw tightened. Those weren't improvised insults. Those were researched. Talia went very still. Someone studied me, Marin said. Someone went through my life and figured out which words would do the most damage in the least amount of time and handed them to her. She looked at her sister. The whole scene was designed to make me walk out that door as fast as possible and not come back. Talia picked up her phone. I'm calling Priya back, she said. Tell her to look at my phone, Marin said. Talia looked up. The reason I went back to the penthouse. Marin's voice was very quiet now. Very precise. I forgot my personal phone. I went back to get it. She looked at the phone on the table, the cracked screen one, the one she'd retrieved from the kitchen counter. I've had that phone for 2 years. I don't forget it. I've never forgotten it. They looked at each other. The kitchen counter, Talia said. It was right there. Exactly where I would have looked. Right in the open, like I just set it down. But you didn't set it down. I don't think I did. Marin's throat felt tight now. Not with tears, with something that was almost anger, but was colder than anger and more dangerous. I think someone put it there. And I think they did it while I was at the community center. And I think they knew exactly what time I'd come back for it. The silence in the kitchen was absolute. They set you up, Talia said. Not a question. They needed a witness, Marin said. Not just a betrayed wife who found out later, not a rumor. An actual witness. Someone who saw it with her own eyes and would react immediately and decisively. She breathed in slowly. They needed me to walk out of that marriage that night. Before Cassian could explain anything. Before I could think about it. They needed the damage done fast and clean, and they needed me to do it myself. Her hands were flat on the table now, completely still. Marin. Talia's voice was careful. I know. She looked up. I know it doesn't change what I saw. It doesn't change what Cassian did or didn't do, or what was true about our marriage before any of this. I'm not going to let this become an excuse to undecide what I've decided. She was very certain about that. Clear in a way she rarely was. But I need to know the truth. All of it. About Sabine, about Casaro, about who put that phone on my kitchen counter and why. She held her sister's eyes. Because whatever is happening here is bigger than a broken marriage. And whoever arranged for me to be in that penthouse at exactly that moment either didn't think about what could happen to me and this baby in the fallout, or they did think about it and decided it didn't matter. Talia's jaw was tight. Either way, Marin said, I want to know who they are. Outside, a car passed slowly on the street below. Then another. Neither of them moved. Then Priya called back, and what she said made both of them very still for a long time. The security footage from the penthouse building's parking level had been recovered partial, degraded in the right ways to suggest someone who knew what they were doing with a recording system rather than someone who'd simply gotten lucky with an angle. But partial was enough. At 6:48 p.m. on Tuesday, 1 hour and 12 minutes after Marin had left for the community center, a figure entered the building through the service entrance, using a code that should not have existed. This person went up to the penthouse level, was inside for less than 4 minutes, and left. At 9:02 p.m., Marin came back for her phone. Someone gave them the code, Talia said. Someone's inside, Marin said. Someone who knew your schedule. The community center. What time you'd leave. Which door you'd use coming back. Priya's voice was flat with the professional kind of calm that lives on the other side of being very unsettled. This isn't a rival organization working blind. Someone inside Cassian's operation fed them everything they needed. And that specific word, inside, was the moment the entire shape of what was happening became visible to Marin in its full size. Not an attack from outside, a betrayal from within. Someone who had been close enough to know the codes, the schedules, the security rotations, the intimate geography of their lives, close enough to have stood in the same rooms, attended the same dinners, perhaps even congratulated them on the pregnancy. Marin looked at her sister. He has a traitor, she said. And somewhere across the city, Cassian Rourke, his most dangerous enemy was not yet know his dangerous walls, was already standing inside his walls that would make every decision he thought he'd controlled start unraveling at once. Cassian got the call at 11:47 p.m. He was still in the penthouse. He hadn't moved much since the papers arrived that morning, had spent most of the day at his desk with a glass of whiskey he kept refilling and not drinking, working through documents that required his signature, and signing them without reading them properly, which was something he never did. His chief of operations, a quiet man named Dell, who had worked for him for 9 years and knew when not to speak, had come and gone twice with things that required decisions. Cassian had made the decisions. He didn't remember what they were. The call came from a number I recognized as one of his secure lines, the ones routed through 3 different servers, and answered only by people who understood what that level of encryption meant about the nature of the information. He picked up on the second ring. There's footage, said the voice on the other end. It was a woman named Reyes who ran his internal security analysis. She had the voice of someone delivering a weather report about a Category 5 hurricane, flat, precise, entirely without comfort. Parking level. Service entrance. Tuesday at 6:48. Cassian set the whiskey glass down very carefully. Someone came in, yes. Using our code.
Yeah.
Which code? Level 3 service access. Changed quarterly. Last changed 6 weeks ago. A pause. The list of people with that code is 11 names long. Cassian was already standing. He didn't remember getting up. Pull the footage to my screen. It's already there. He went to the secondary monitor on his desk. The footage was degraded. Someone had worked the recording, blurred specific identifying details with the particular precision of a professional rather than the panic of an amateur. But the shape was there. Average height. Moved with purpose, not hesitation. Knew exactly which corridor led where. Was inside for under 4 minutes, which meant they knew exactly what they were going in for. Timestamp against Marin's departure, he said. She left at 5:36. This person entered at 6:48. She returned at 9:02. He stood very still, looking at the screen. Someone put her phone there, he said. It wasn't a question. It's the only explanation that fits the timing. He put his hand flat on the desk, felt the edge of it dig into his palm. Get me the 11 names. Already sent. He looked at the list on his screen. 11 people. People who had access to his building, his security infrastructure. The coded entryways that he had believed were known only to the innermost circle of an operation he had spent 15 years building into something that didn't have weak points. People he had vetted personally. People he had trusted with the address of every safe house, every secondary exit, every contingency. He read through the names. He stopped at one. He read it again. Then he closed his eyes for exactly 3 seconds, which was as much time as he was going to allow himself. Get me Ronan, he said. Reyes paused. The pause was almost imperceptible. Get me Ronan Trell tonight. I don't care what time it is. Another pause, longer. Mr. Rourke. Ronan's vehicle left the secondary garage at 7:23 this evening. He hasn't checked in since. The room went very quiet. Phone? Dark. Tracker on the vehicle? Disabled. Cassian stood with the phone against his ear and looked at the list of 11 names and felt something move through him that was not rage, and was not grief, and was not surprise. Because surprise would have required him not to know, on some fundamental level, what this was, and he did know. He had known for perhaps 30 seconds, and it felt like it had been 3 years. He's gone, Cassian said. It appears so. How long has he been feeding them? We don't know yet. How long has he had access to my family's schedule? Mr. Rourke, Ronan has been in your inner circle for. How long has he had access to my family's schedule? His voice was completely even, which was the most dangerous version of his voice, and everyone who worked for him knew it. 16 years, Ray said quietly. 16 years. Cassian set the phone down without hanging up. He walked to the window that looked out over the city, the same window he'd been standing near when Marin walked through that door 2 nights ago. The city was the same. The rain was gone. The lights were very clear. Ronan Trell had been the first person to congratulate him when he married Marin. Had stood at their wedding not as a guest, as something closer. Had shaken his hand afterward and told him, with the particular gruffness of a man who didn't perform sentiment, that he was glad to see it. Had sent a gift for the baby. Had been in this building dozens of times. Had eaten at their table, and had been, for some portion of that time Cassian didn't know yet how long, but he was going to find out, feeding pieces of their lives to Lucian Casaro. The phone was still on the desk with Reyes on the line. He picked it back up. I want every communication Ronan has had through any channel for the past 2 years. I want his financials. I want his secondary contacts. I want every meeting logged with anyone outside the organization. He stopped. And I want to know when Lucian Casaro is in Seattle. A very short pause. We believe he arrived this afternoon, Reyes said. Cassian turned away from the window. Then we're already behind, he said. He called Dell next, and then 2 other people, whose roles didn't have titles. And by midnight, the penthouse had gone from the silence of a man sitting alone with a bad decision to the controlled urgency of a command center reorganizing around a breach. Men came and went. Laptops opened. Secure lines ran. Cassian moved through all of it with the particular efficiency of someone who has learned to convert devastation directly into action, which was perhaps his defining skill, and perhaps also how he had made every mistake that had gotten him here. At 1:15 a.m., one of his people, a researcher named Colt, who was 27 and the best at finding things that had been deliberately hidden, came to the desk with a printed sheet. Recruitment agency, Colt said, setting it down. The one that placed Sabine. Cassian looked at the sheet, followed the ownership chain with his eyes. 4 companies, 3 jurisdictions, and at the end of it, a private equity structure he recognized not by name but by signature, the particular way Lucian's organization built its financial walls, layered and deniable and patient. She was his from the beginning, Cassian said. Yes, sir. She was placed inside my company. We believe so. He sat with that. He was not a man who permitted himself the luxury of feeling foolish, but he permitted it for approximately 4 seconds, because he had trusted Sabine with operational information, had let her into rooms, had believed her access was earned rather than engineered. Where is she now? He said. Unknown. Her apartment was cleared before you received the papers. We think Kesaro pulled her out, or she ran. Possible. Or Cassian said slowly she ran from Kesaro. Colt looked at him. She was a plant, Cassian said, which means at some point she was given orders she didn't choose. And at some point, whatever she was ordered to do crossed a line she didn't want to cross. He thought about the bedroom, about Marin's face, about Sabine's voice, which had been, and he was only now, from a distance, able to hear it accurately, not cruel exactly. Precise, surgical, like someone performing an operation they needed to complete quickly before they lost their nerve. Pull everything on her background. Family, prior employment, anything she left behind in her apartment that got missed. Colt made a note and left. Cassian poured the whiskey. He'd been not drinking all evening, and this time actually drank it. He thought about Marin, about the phone on the counter, placed there by someone who knew when she'd come back, about the scene arranged for her to walk into, about Sabine's specific words you read books to children, that's lovely, which had been chosen by someone who had studied Marin Whitlock with the care of a person preparing a weapon. Someone had taken the fragile thing that already existed between him and his wife, the distance that had grown, the silences, the choices he'd made without her consent, and had used it, had found every crack and pressed deliberately into it. He had given them the cracks to work with. That was the part he had to live with. He refilled the glass and didn't drink the second one either. At 2:30 a.m., Colt came back. She had a sister, he said. Younger, 2 nieces, ages 4 and 6. He set down another sheet. The sister's address was included in communications we recovered from one of Ronan's secondary channels. He paused. The implication was that Kesaro knew where they were. Cassian looked at the sheet. He threatened her family, he said. That's the read. How long ago? The communication was from 8 months back. Colt's voice was neutral in the way people made their voices neutral when the information was ugly. Around the time, the operation shifted from corporate intelligence to personal. Around the time Sabine started doing whatever she did to get close enough to destroy his marriage. Cassian set the sheet down. He didn't say anything for a moment. Find the sister, he said finally. Make sure she and the children are somewhere Kesaro can't reach. Colt didn't ask why, which was one of the reasons Cassian kept him. Yes, sir. The next 12 hours were the most controlled chaos Cassian had managed in years. His organization moved fast when it had to. It was one of the things he'd built deliberately, the capacity to restructure quickly around a crisis. But fast meant relying on people, and the knowledge of Ronan's betrayal had thrown a shadow over every name in his roster. He didn't know how deep it went. He didn't know what Ronan had told Kesaro about personnel, about safe locations, about the specific rhythms of operation that made his organization function. He had to assume Kesaro knew too much and plan accordingly, which meant rebuilding the perimeter from the outside in, trusting only the people he could verify independently. It also meant that at 8 a.m., when his lawyer called to begin the formal divorce proceedings response, Cassian told him to cooperate with everything. The lawyer was quiet for a moment.
Sir, if we contest the...
Don't contest anything, Cassian said. Give them what they ask for. There are significant assets. I know what there are. He looked out the window at the morning, which was gray and still. Give them the financial disclosures. All of them. Don't hide anything. Another pause. Including the trust? They already know about the trust. He could hear how tired he sounded and couldn't do anything about it. I said all of them. He hung up. He didn't call Marin. He had wanted to, several times in the night, had picked up the phone twice. There was nothing he could say that would be honest and also useful, and he had enough respect for her left, maybe more respect for her now than he'd had when they were still together, which was the specific irony he was going to have to sit with to understand that calling her at 3 a.m. to tell her he'd discovered a conspiracy was not comfort. It was another version of him, deciding what she needed to know and when. She would find out. Talia's people were good. They were probably already getting close. His job right now was to find Ronan before Ronan could destroy anything else, and to figure out what Kesaro was planning to do, now that the opening move of his strategy had partially succeeded. The marriage was broken. Marin was gone, but Cassian was still standing. And Kesaro, Cassian was beginning to understand, had made a miscalculation. He'd assumed the marriage was the fortress. He was wrong. It took 3 more hours to find the first solid lead on Ronan's location, and it came from the most unexpected direction, a fuel purchase on a credit card Ronan had used exactly once before, 3 years ago, for a boat rental at a marina 40 minutes outside the city. Small marina, private slips, the kind of place that didn't ask questions, because its clientele paid specifically for the absence of questions. Cassian sent 2 people. They came back with nothing but confirmation that a boat had left Slip 14 at midnight, which matched the timeline, and that the slip was rented under a name that traced back after 40 minutes of work to one of Lucian Kesaro's oldest shell structures. Ronan wasn't hiding from Kesaro. He was with Kesaro. That landed differently than Cassian had expected. He'd built a framework in his head where Ronan had been compromised, caught in something, pressured, maybe threatened the way Sabine had been threatened. That framework was easier. It had room for betrayal as a thing that happened to someone rather than a thing someone chose. The boat changed it. You don't voluntarily board your handler's vessel at midnight if you're a victim of coercion. Ronan had not been trapped. Ronan had chosen. Cassian sat with this for a long time in the silence of his office, while the rest of the floor moved around him. He thought about 16 years. He thought about every piece of information Ronan had ever been given access to, which was almost everything, which was the whole machine, and tried to calculate the damage. The number was too large. He stopped calculating. He thought about Marin instead. About the fact that Ronan had known her schedule, her volunteer hours, community center, the route she drove, which phone she would notice missing. When she'd go back, Ronan had built the trap for her. Not Kesaro, not some faceless operative. Ronan, who had stood at their wedding with his hands clasped and his face doing something that had looked like genuine feeling, had used everything he knew about Marin Whitlock to engineer the worst night of her life. Something went very cold in Cassian's chest and stayed there. He picked up his phone and called a number he hadn't called in 3 years. A number that connected to a federal investigator named Harlan Priest, who worked organized crime and who had, at various points over the last decade, been building a case against Cassian and against Kesaro simultaneously. It was the kind of phone call that had only one direction and couldn't be untaken. Priest answered on the 3rd ring. "Rourke," he said. Not surprised. "I have information," Cassian said. Pause. Define information. Lucian Kesaro is in Seattle. I can tell you where he's been, what he's been building for 3 years, and the name of the man inside my organization who's been feeding him. He stopped. In exchange. You don't get to define the exchange on a call like this, Priest said. I'm not asking for immunity, Cassian said. I'm asking for protection. For my wife and my daughter. The line was quiet. Ex-wife, Priest said carefully. For my daughter's mother, Cassian said. And my daughter. Whatever she is to me legally, she is someone Kesaro has already flagged as a target. I want federal protection on them before I give you anything else. Another pause. Longer. That's a significant ask. I know what I'm trading for it. Priest's voice shifted. How significant? Everything, Cassian said. I'll give you everything. He meant it when he said it. He also understood what it meant, what everything would cost, what it would expose, what would come after for him personally. He understood all of that with complete clarity. He just didn't care anymore. He cared about one thing, which was that his daughter be born into a world where she was not already a target, and that her mother be able to move through that world without Lucian Casaro's people deciding when she went home and what she walked into. That was the only thing left that he had any power to actually accomplish. I'll need to bring in my team, Priest said. Bring whoever you need. This kind of meeting tonight, Cassian said, before Kesaro moves. I don't know what he's planning next, but he didn't come to Seattle because the original plan succeeded. He came because it didn't go far enough. He paused. He wanted me to collapse. I didn't. Now he's here to finish it himself. A very long pause. 7 o'clock, Priest said finally. I'll send you a location. Cassian hung up. He sat very still for a moment with the phone in his hand. Then he called Dell and began preparing for a meeting that was going to change everything he'd spent 15 years building. He was in the middle of that conversation when his secondary line lit up with an unknown number, which he almost didn't answer. He answered it because the area code was local, and something made him. The voice on the other end was a woman's. Shaken, but controlled, the controlled part was clearly costing her something. Mr. Rourke, you don't know me. A pause. My name is Sabine Corvell. Everything in the room went still. I know who you are, he said. I know you do. Another pause. Breathing that wasn't quite steady. I'm calling because I made choices that hurt people who didn't deserve it. And because I have something that can end this, and I don't trust Kesaro's people not to take it from me if I wait any longer. Her voice steadied slightly. I have documentation. Financial records, communication logs, account structures, photographs, and a complete written account of everything Kesaro's organization has done for the past 4 years, including what they did to your marriage. Everything. Cassian gripped the phone. Where are you? He said. Somewhere he doesn't know about yet, but not for long. Her voice cracked slightly on the last word, and she sealed it back up. There's something else you need to know. About why they needed your marriage destroyed specifically. About what the actual target was. She stopped. It wasn't you, Mr. Rourke. It was never about you. He waited. It was about your daughter, she said. The trust you set up. The financial structure. If your marriage ended in a specific way, contested, hostile, legally chaotic, there was a mechanism Kesaro had built to challenge the trust's protected status. A legal argument they'd been preparing for 8 months. Her voice was very quiet now. They didn't want to hurt your daughter. They wanted her inheritance. They needed you and your wife at war with each other, because a united couple can defend a trust that a divorcing one can't. The silence was absolute. They used my wife, Cassian said. His voice came out very low. They engineered the entire thing to get to the trust. Yes, and you went along with it. A long pause. I had people to protect, she said, and then I ran out of ways to justify what I was doing to yours. Her voice broke the rest of the way. I'm sorry. I know that's worth nothing. I'm saying it anyway. Cassian stood at his window for a moment. Tell me where you are, he said. I'll meet your wife first, she said. Not you. A pause. Can you make that happen? He thought about Marin. About what she would say to that. I'll ask her, he said. That's the best I can do. Then ask her tonight. Sabine's voice dropped. Because Kesaro's people have been watching me for 2 days, and I don't think I have much longer before they figure out where I went. She gave him a number to text when the meeting was confirmed. Then she hung up. Cassian stood with the phone in his hand for a long time. Then he called Talia's house. Not Marin's number. Talia's. Because some part of him understood that calling Marin directly with this was another version of him deciding what she needed to know, and how and when. That Talia would hear the information and let her sister decide. Talia answered on the second ring with the wariness of someone who picks up late calls professionally. "Rourke," she said. "I need to talk to Marin," he said. "Not to argue. Not about the divorce. I have information that concerns her safety and our daughter's safety. And there's a woman who wants to meet her tonight who has documentation that can end this." Silence. Talia said. "Sabine Corvell," he said. The silence on the other end was the longest one Talia had produced in any conversation they'd ever had, which was saying something. "You have 2 minutes," she said finally. "I'm going to get my sister." He heard footsteps, a door, muffled voices in a room he couldn't see. He stood at the window and looked at the city lights and waited. And then he heard Marin's voice, careful, flat, with the specific flatness she'd been using with him since the elevator come through the line. "Talk," she said. So he did. He told her everything. All of it, in order, without shaping it or softening it, or deciding what she could handle. He told her about the footage, about the access code, about Ronan. He told her about Kesaro arriving in Seattle and what that likely meant. He told her about the trust and the legal mechanism Kesaro had built around a hostile divorce, and what that meant their daughter had been, to this man not a child, a financial target. And then he told her about Sabine's call. When he finished, the line was quiet. "She wants to meet me," Marin said. "Yes, tonight. She says she's running out of time." A pause. He could hear Marin breathing. He could hear Talia saying something low in the background. "Why me?" Marin said. "Why not you?" I asked her that. "What did she say?" "She said you were the one she owed it to." The silence stretched. And then, from outside the window, in the street below, a sound that didn't belong. Traffic, not rain. Something else. Something that had the particular quality of being where it shouldn't be at the time it shouldn't be. And Cassian had spent enough years recognizing that quality to move before he'd finished consciously identifying it. He stepped back from the window. 2 seconds later, the glass cracked in a clean, expert line that meant precisely one thing. Someone outside was watching the penthouse, and they had just let him know they were there. Cassian moved away from the window without turning his back to it. That was the first thing, the instinct that came before thought. The muscle memory of 15 years of operating in spaces where the wrong move at the wrong moment had permanent consequences. He kept his body angled, put the desk between himself and the glass, and reached for the secondary phone on the side drawer without taking his eyes off the crack that ran from the upper left corner of the window pane down to the frame. Not a bullet. The angle was wrong for a bullet, and there was no hole. Pressure crack. A focused device handheld, designed to communicate rather than injure. A message delivered in glass. "We see you. We're already here. Count your next moves carefully." He had the phone to his ear before the crack had finished spreading. "Reyes," he said when she picked up. "Someone just tagged the north window of the penthouse. Pressure crack, no penetration. Get eyes on the street level southwest corner, the parking structure across from us, and the roofline of the building to the east. Do it now. Don't announce." "On it," she said, and he heard her already moving. He still had Marin on the other line. He'd put it on hold when the glass cracked, the automatic hold of a man shifting from one emergency to another, and now he looked at the blinking indicator and felt something pull in his chest. He picked it back up. "Marin," he said. "What just happened?" It wasn't a question. Her voice had gone to the flat, clipped place it went when she was frightened and refusing to perform it. Someone outside, not a shot, a warning, Kesaro. Or his people. Yes. A pause. He heard Talia in the background, the sharp intake of breath, then the sound of her moving, the particular rapid step of a lawyer pivoting into action mode. "He knows you talked to Sabine," Marin said. "He may have been monitoring her when she called." "Which means he knows she reached out." "Yes." "Which means he's moving tonight." "Marin," he kept his voice level, "I need you to stay exactly where you are. Don't open the front door. Don't, Cassian." Her voice cut through his cleanly. "Don't tell me to stay where I am. Tell me what's happening. so I can decide what to do. That's the difference, remember? He closed his eyes for 1 second. She was right. She was completely right. And there was no version of this where she wasn't right. And the fact that she was right while he was staring at a cracked window with Kessero's people in the street below was one of the great specific punishments of his current existence. There are vehicles outside, Reyes said in his ear. Southwest corner, too. Dark plates. And something on the roofline east could be equipment, could be personnel. How many in the vehicles? Can't confirm from here. He thought fast. The penthouse was secure, in theory reinforced glass, secured elevator, a second exit through the service corridor that Ronan had known about for 16 years. The service corridor was now compromised. He had to assume everything Ron had known was compromised, which was almost everything. I'm coming to you, he said into Marin's phone. Not a question this time. Not a management decision. Not to take over. To put myself between you and whatever Kessero is moving tonight. That's all. A pause on her end. Talia's house, she said. I know where you are. Bring as few people as possible. Talia doesn't want a convoy in her street. 2, he said. Just 2. Fine. A beat. Cassian. Yeah. Drive careful. She said it the way you say something that means several things at once, and he wasn't going to take the time right now to untangle which things. Always, he said. He hung up. He called Priest next. The timeline moved, he said when the federal investigator answered. Casaro isn't waiting. Someone just tagged my building. Priest's voice shifted into the gear it kept for exactly these moments, sharpened, stripped of everything unnecessary. Where are you? Still at the penthouse. I'm moving in 10 minutes. You need to get people to Talia Whitlock's address tonight. Text it. She's sheltering my wife and my wife's sister, and we have reason to believe Casaro has a mechanism for targeting the child's trust through a contested divorce proceeding, which means Marin Whitlock active leverage for him right now. Priest was quiet for exactly 3 seconds. I can have people there in 40 minutes. Make it 30. He picked up his jacket. I'll be there in 25. Don't engage anything on the way. I'm trying to avoid it, Cassian said. Can't promise. He ended the call and looked at Dell, who had appeared in the doorway with the particular stillness of a man waiting for an order he already knew was coming. You're driving, Cassian said. Take the underground route to the secondary lot. If anyone follows, don't lose them. Just make sure I know we have a tail. And Marcus on the other car. Different route. Meet us 3 blocks east of the address. Dell nodded once and disappeared. Cassian took one more look at the cracked window. The city beyond it looked exactly as it always had, indifferent, electric, its 10,000 lit windows hiding 10,000 private versions of catastrophe. He had lived inside this city's particular ecosystem for 15 years. He had built something in it that people were afraid of, and he had believed for a long time that fear was the same thing as control. He understood now that it wasn't. He picked up the flash drive on his desk, the one containing the preliminary evidence package he'd assembled for Priest, the first layer of what he was prepared to hand over and put it in his jacket pocket. Then he walked out. The drive through the city took 18 minutes. Dell was good moved through traffic, with a quietness that didn't announce itself, took 3 unnecessary turns that told Cassian within the first 5 minutes that they did have a tail. 1 vehicle, staying far enough back to be deniable. Don't lose it, Cassian said. I know. They pulled up to Talia's street at 11:52 p.m. Marcus and the second car arrived from the east 40 seconds later, which was as clean as it ever got. The tail had dropped 2 blocks back, either peeling off or repositioning. Cassian got out of the car. The front light at Talia's house was on. He was halfway up the walk when the door opened. Talia, not Marin, standing in the doorway with the expression of a woman who has decided she is the checkpoint and is very comfortable with that. Before you come in, she said. I know, he said. Do you? This is her house, her space. I'm here to give information and to be another body between your sister and whoever is in that vehicle 2 blocks east. He stopped at the bottom of the porch steps. I'm not here to fix anything. I'm not here to argue. I'm not asking for anything. Talia looked at him for a moment. The look of someone deciding whether the assessment is accurate or whether it's a performance of accuracy. Fine, she said, and stepped back. The living room was small and lit with the kind of lamplight that made everything look like the inside of a hard conversation. Marin was standing near the window. On the far side, she had pulled the curtain 2 inches from the wall, which told him she'd been watching the street. She turned when he came in. She was in a gray sweater that was too big, and her feet were bare. And she had one hand flat against her lower back, which was how she stood when the baby's weight was giving her trouble. She looked at him with the careful, steady look she'd been developing over the past 72 hours. The one that had replaced the more open version he'd known for 3 years. He understood he had made that happen. Tell me about the vehicles, she said. Not hello. Not any acknowledgement of what it was to see him. Just the thing that mattered right now. So he told her. All of it, the crack in the window, the tale, Reyes's street assessment, Priest's timeline, what he'd been able to piece together about Casasaro's probable next move. Talia sat at the kitchen table with a legal pad and took notes as he talked, which would have seemed absurd in any other context, and in this one was just Talia. When he finished, Marin was quiet for a moment. He's here because the original plan didn't go far enough, she said. It was almost word for word what he'd said to Priest earlier. He needed us in a hostile divorce. We're in a divorce, but you're cooperating. She paused. So the legal mechanism for the trust doesn't work. Correct. Which means he's running out of options and time. Which makes him more dangerous, Cassian said. Not less. Talia looked up from her pad. What does he actually do next? Concretely. He tries to create a crisis that forces the trust into contested territory through another mechanism. An injury claim, a custody dispute that escalates to court-ordered intervention, something that puts the trust's protected status under legal challenge, while a judge is already looking at the case. Cassian kept his voice even. Or he tries to eliminate the complication entirely. The room went quiet. Meaning me, Marin said. Meaning you. She didn't flinch. He had not expected her to flinch, but there was still something in him that hoped she would register it differently, that the specific terror of that sentence would hit her face so he'd have something to respond to. Instead, she just absorbed it. The way she'd been absorbing things for 3 days and processed it into the next question. When is Sabine coming? She said. She said when we confirmed. I haven't confirmed yet. He looked at her. That's your decision. Marin had looked at Talia. Talia set her pen down. If her documentation is what she says it is, it's the cleanest way to end this. Federal investigators with Casaro's full financial structure and a written confession from someone inside the operation can move on him tonight. She paused. If Casaro's people are already watching her, bringing her here puts this house in the middle of it. They're already watching this house, Marinson said. Or they will be, as soon as they finish repositioning from wherever they were covering Cassian. She hadn't taken her eyes off the half-inch gap in the curtain. Bringing Sabine here doesn't increase the risk. It just means we have something to show for it. Cassian looked at his wife, at the person who had been his wife, who was in the technical process of not being his wife anymore, and felt something move through him that he didn't have a clean name for. It was something adjacent to being humbled, which was not a sensation he had extensive experience with. Text her, Marin said. Tell her to come. He texted the number Sabine had given him. 30 seconds later, a response came back. A single word. Coming. 40 minutes, he said. Marin nodded. She moved away from the window and lowered herself into the armchair in the corner, carefully, with the particular, managed deliberateness of the last trimester. She put both hands on her belly and looked at the floor for a moment. Are you all right? Cassian said. He said it before he could decide whether to say it. She looked up at him. I'm 37 weeks pregnant, and there are criminal vehicles watching my sister's house, she said. Define all right. Fair point, he said. Something flickered across her face. Not warmth exactly, but not the deliberate absence of warmth either. Something in between, something that acknowledged they had once known how to be in a room together, without it costing this much. Talia refilled her coffee and didn't comment on any of it. The next 35 minutes were the particular torture of waiting in a contained space while something larger moved outside it. Cassian stayed near the back of the house, monitoring Reyes remotely. The tail vehicle had repositioned now 2 blocks north, which meant it was covering both approaches. Marcus, stationed east, reported a third vehicle he hadn't seen before arriving and parking on the parallel street. 3 vehicles, more personnel than surveillance required. He reported this to Priest, who told him federal vehicles were 12 minutes out. The math was getting tight. At 12:31 a.m., a car Cassian didn't recognize pulled up 2 houses down and parked. No lights. The driver's door opened, and a figure got out and moved quickly along the sidewalk with the posture of someone trying to be small. She made it to Talia's front walk before one of Casaro's vehicles started its engine. "She's been followed," Marcus said in Cassian's ear. "The north vehicle is moving." "I see it," Dell said. Cassian was already at the front door. Sabine made it up the porch steps and through the door that Cassian held open in time for him to close it behind her before the moving vehicle completed its repositioning to a direct sightline. She looked not the way he remembered her. The version of Sabine Corvell he had known was composed in the particular way of someone who had trained themselves never to appear rattled. The woman who came through Talia's front door was rattled. Her coat was wrong too light for the temperature, grabbed in a hurry, and there was a cut above her left eyebrow that had been closed with a butterfly bandage, applied, without much steadiness of hand. And she was carrying a laptop bag against her chest with both arms, like it was the only thing she owned. She saw Marin. She stopped moving completely. Marin was standing, now had gotten up from the chair when she heard the door, one hand on the armrest for support. She was looking at Sabine with an expression that Cassian could not entirely read. It wasn't anger, or at least not just anger. It was the expression of a person confronting something that needs to be gotten through. Neither of them said anything for a moment. Then Talia appeared from the kitchen doorway and said, "Living room." "Sit down, both of you." Sabine sat on the edge of the couch. Marin took the armchair again. Cassian stood near the hallway entrance and stayed quiet, because whatever was about to happen between these 2 women was not something he had the right to anchor. "How bad is it?" Talia said to Sabine, nodding toward the cut on her face. "I fell," Sabine said. "Then more honestly, someone pushed me. 48 hours ago, when I tried to leave the apartment they'd moved me to. I got away." She set the laptop bag on the coffee table. "I've had this with me since then." "What's in it?" Talia said. "Everything." Sabine looked at Marin when she said it, not Talia. 4 years of Casaro's financial operations, communication logs, internal memos, account transfers in 11 jurisdictions, photographs of meetings with individuals in 3 government agencies. She paused. "And a written account, my account, of everything I was instructed to do and why." Another pause. "Including what I said to you." Marin's hands were folded over her belly. She was very still. "You studied me," Marin said. "Yes." "You were given a profile." "Yes." "Who built it?" "Ronan Trell." Sabine said the name without hesitation, which told Cassian she had been waiting to say it. "He built a detailed profile of you over 14 months. Your schedule, your relationships, your volunteer work, your insecurities, things he'd gathered from being in your home, from conversations with Cassian that he later reported, from following your patterns." Her voice was controlled but just barely. "He knew which words would make you leave immediately. He selected them. He gave them to me." Marin absorbed this. "And you used them," she said. "Yes." "Because he had your sister." "Yes." Sabine's composure cracked on that syllable, sealed itself back, cracked again slightly. "He had her address, photos of my nieces at their school. A message from Casaro that was specific enough that I understood exactly what specific meant." She looked at her hands. "I'm not asking you to excuse that. I know what I did. I know the night I walked into your home was something I can't unwalk into." She looked up. "But I needed you to know it wasn't. I wasn't." She stopped. "The things I said to you, the way I said them, I had been told exactly how to say them. That doesn't make me not the one who said them. But I need you to know that there was no moment in that room where I didn't know exactly what I was taking from you." Marin was quiet for a long time. "That's almost worse," she said finally. "I know. You knew what it would do and you did it anyway." "Yes, because your family, because my family." Sabine's voice went to almost nothing. Yes, another silence. I understand that, Marin said. I don't forgive it, but I understand it. Sabine nodded once, very small. Talia stepped forward and held out her hand. The drive, she said. Or however it's stored. Sabine reached into the bag and produced a sealed hard drive and a manila envelope. The drive has the financial and communication records. The envelope is the written account. I've already transmitted copies to a federal evidence address. I did it 2 hours ago from a library terminal. She held Talia's gaze. I didn't want there to be only one copy. Smart, Talia said. I've been making bad decisions for 8 months, Sabine said. I'm trying to make one good one. Cassian's phone buzzed. Reyes North vehicle moving, fast, toward your location. Then Dell, second vehicle. They're converging. He looked up from the phone. We're out of time. Talia was already moving. Back door. Covered, Cassian said. Marcus is on the east side but the parallel street vehicle. How many exits does this house have? Marnes said. She was already on her feet, one hand on the back of the armchair, steady, not performing calm, but actually inhabiting it, which was its own particular thing to witness. Front, back, and there's a side gate to the alley, Talia said. She was pulling a coat from the hallway closet as she talked. The alley runs behind 4 houses and comes out on the cross street. Can you walk it? Cassian said to Marin. She gave him a look that very precisely communicated her feelings about that question. Right, he said. Sabine, Talia said. Can you run? If I have to, Sabine said. You'll have to. Cassian was on the phone with Dell. Side alley, east exit to the cross street. Bring the car around. Leave it running. He looked at Marcus's position on his phone tracker. Marcus, stay on the parallel street vehicle. I need to know if it moves. Moving now, Marcus said. Slowly, not surveillance anymore. Approach speed. Move, Cassian said to the room. They went through the kitchen, Talia leading, Cassian behind Marin, who moved faster than he'd expected, and with a steadiness that made him understand she was operating on something pure and instinctual now. Sabine came last, the bag over her shoulder, the coat Talia had thrown at her, not fully on but held close. The back door opened onto a narrow yard, a fence, a gate that Talia unlocked with a key from her pocket without fumbling. The alley was dark and smelled like concrete and old rain and the particular nowhere smell of spaces between things. They moved single file, Talia first, then Marin, then Sabine, then Cassian. 30 feet in, Cassian heard the front of the house. A sound that was not a car door and was not a footstep, but was somewhere between the sound of people deploying from a vehicle in a way designed to minimize noise and maximize coverage. 3, maybe 4, moving to surround. He pressed closer behind Marin. Faster, he said quietly. She picked up the pace without question. They were 60 feet from the cross street exit when a vehicle appeared at the end of the alley, headlights off, engine barely audible, blocking the exit completely. Talia stopped. Cassian felt the back of his neck go cold. Other direction, he said immediately. That's back toward the house. I know. They turned. 50 feet back the way they'd come, a figure appeared at the gate they'd just come through. Dark coat. Something in the right hand that caught no light, which was the specific kind of thing that catches no light. Boxed. Both directions. Cassian moved in front of Marin without thinking about it, the movement so immediate it happened before he'd registered making it. He felt her hand close briefly on his arm, not holding him back, not pulling at him, just a hand making contact, the involuntary reaching of a person toward another person in a moment that has just become very specific. He covered it with his free hand for exactly 1 second. Then he was working the phone again. 2 simultaneous calls, Dell and Priest, and talking fast and quiet. Alley compromised. Both ends. Cross Street South exit and the north gate are covered. We need a vehicle on the east side breach point in. 40 seconds, Dell said. We don't have 40 seconds. 35. There's a gate in the fence on the right side. Talia said, low and fast, pointing at the wall to their right. Mrs. Pirano's yard. She leaves it unlocked. You know that how? Marin said. She's 73 and I bring her mail when she's away. Talia was already moving toward it. The figure at the north end of the alley was walking toward them. Not running, walking, which was its own kind of statement. Go, Cassian said. Talia hit the gate and it opened, and they went through into a dark yard that smelled like garden soil and cat. A small house, lights off. Another fence is on the far side. Cassian came through last and pulled the gate shut behind him. Over, Talia said at the far fence. I can't. Marin started. I'll go first, Sabine said. She was already there, already pulling herself up with the kind of strength that comes from desperation, overriding everything else, swung her leg over the top, dropped to the other side with a sound that was more controlled than graceful. Marin, Cassian said. I know. She was already at the fence. Help me. He made a step with his hands. Oh, she put her foot in it, and he lifted and she grabbed the top of the fence, and he was watching her and the alley gate at the same time, and the alley gate was moving. Go, he said. She went over. He pulled himself up and over the fence, as the gate behind him opened and stayed low on the landing, absorbing the impact through his legs, and hit his phone, simultaneously Dell. Where? East Side Street. 10 seconds. The yard they'd landed in was narrow and led to a side street. Talia already had the side gate open, and Sabine was through it, and Marin was 2 steps behind when headlights appeared at the east end of the street. Dell's car, it had to be Dell's car. Cassian grabbed Marin's arm, not pulling, just present, a hand at her elbow, and they moved. The car was there, engine running. Dell, the rear door open before they reached it. Marin in first. Then Sabine said, Cassian came last, and the door was barely shut before Dell was moving. Nobody said anything for a moment. The car moved through 2 turns, and then a straight stretch, and the rear window showed an empty street behind them. Cassian heard Marin breathing, controlled, deliberate, the breathing of someone who has been managing something physical alongside everything else and is now permitting themselves to feel it. He looked over. She had both hands back on her belly. Her jaw was tight. Marin, he said. I'm fine. I said I'm fine. She looked at him. I need a minute. He gave her the minute. Outside, the city moved past the windows. Talia was on her phone calling Gideon, he guessed, because Talia's first call in a crisis was always her lawyer, which was possibly because Talia was a lawyer and understood the priority. Sabine sat with the bag in her lap and her forehead against the window and her eyes closed. Cassian's phone buzzed. Priest federal units at Whitlock address now. 3 individuals detained. Where are you? He typed back a location. Priest, get to the federal building. We need you there. All of you. He looked at Marin. Priest wants us at the federal building. To give the evidence, she said. And statements. She nodded slowly. Then that's where we're going. Marin. He kept his voice low. I need you to know something before we get there. She turned and looked at him in the dark interior of the car. When we go in, he said. When I give Priest what I have. I'm giving him everything. Not just Casaro, everything. He held her gaze. My records, my operations. What I built, he stopped. It means the kind of legal process that's going to follow for me personally. I know what it means, she said. I wanted you to know I understand that. And I'm doing it anyway. She looked at him for a long moment. Something moved across her face that was complex and layered in a way he wasn't going to be able to decode entirely in a moving car at 1 a.m. Why are you telling me, she said. Because you deserve to know, he said. Because I'm done deciding what you can handle. The car made another turn. Outside, the federal building appeared at the end of the block, lit up. Several vehicles out front that hadn't been there an hour ago. Okay, Marin said quietly. Then let's go. They pulled up to the building. Dell stopped the car. No one moved immediately. That specific stillness of a group of people on the far side of something terrible arriving at a threshold. Then Marin opened her door. She was halfway out when she stopped. Her left hand went to the door frame, and her right went back to her belly, and she made a sound small, controlled, but unmistakable. Cassian was out of the car and at her door before he'd consciously decided to move. What is it? He said. She looked at him. Her face had changed something inside it, was concentrating inward, pulling away from the conversation, from the building, from all of it, and focusing on something that was entirely and only biological. I think, she said slowly and stopped. He waited. I think we might need to make a different. She stopped, she said. Talia appeared at his shoulder, took one look at Marin's face, and was already turning back to the car. Del, she said. Hospital now. I'm fine, Marin said. I said I'm probably. She stopped again. The hand on the doorframe tightened. Okay, she said, through closed teeth. Possibly not fine. Cassian put his hand under her arm, steady, careful. She didn't shake it off. He helped her back into the car. Del was already on the phone with a hospital contact as the car turned south. Talia was in the front seat, turned backward, watching her sister with the specific watchfulness of someone trying to appear less terrified than they are. Sabine sat pressed against the far door, giving as much space as a vehicle allows. Marin leaned her head back against the seat. Her breathing had changed rhythm, slower, more deliberate, the breath of someone managing pain rather than ignoring it. Cassian sat beside her with his hands loose in his lap, not reaching, not managing, just present. He could feel the warmth of her arm 3 inches from his and could feel his own heartbeat in a way he rarely did, too fast, too present, the specific cardiac urgency of something that matters more than he has language for. Cassian, she said, without opening her eyes. Yeah. If something happens, nothing is going to. I'm not asking for reassurance. She opened her eyes and looked at him. If something happens, you take Leora. Whatever the legal process is for you, whatever comes after you show up for her. That's what matters. He wanted to say something that was equal to the moment. He had spent 15 years in a world where the right words at the right moment were a form of power, and he had nothing. Yeah, he said. I will. She nodded and closed her eyes again. The hospital entrance appeared through the windshield, the lights sharp and white against the dark. Del pulled up to the emergency bay, and before the car had fully stopped, a nurse was already at the door with a wheelchair, and the night air rushed in cold and bright and carrying all the specific, terrible urgency of something that cannot be paused. Marin gripped the doorframe. Then she looked back at Cassian, one more look. Quick and clear-eyed, the kind that doesn't need to say what it contains. Then she went through the door. And Cassian stood at the entrance to the hospital with the evidence drive in his pocket and the weight of 15 years of wrong decisions pressing down on both shoulders, and watched the automatic doors close between him and the only thing in his life that he hadn't yet managed to ruin, carrying the other thing in his life that he would not allow himself to ruin, moving away from him and into the bright, indifferent hands of people who were going to do what he could not. Take care of them. He stood there. The doors stayed closed. The automatic doors stayed closed. Cassian stood at the edge of the emergency bay. For 11 seconds he counted them, without meaning to, the way the mind reaches for something measurable when everything else has stopped being measurable. And then he turned and looked at Del, who was standing by the car with his hands at his sides and his face, doing the careful nothing it did when he was waiting for direction. Go back to the federal building, Cassian said. Take Sabine. She needs to give Priest the drive and her statement tonight. Don't let them stall her. Don't let them put her in a room alone. Stay in the corridor until Priest personally confirms her protection arrangement is in writing. Del nodded. And Del. Cassian looked at him. Thank you. For tonight. Del held his gaze for a moment. Yes, sir, he said. Then he got in the car. Cassian watched it pull away. Then he turned back to the hospital entrance and pushed through the automatic doors himself. The emergency intake was the specific controlled chaos of a hospital at 2 a.m, overhead lights too bright. After the dark of the last hour, the smell of antiseptic and floor wax, and the particular human smell of too many people in distress in too small a space. A nurse at the desk looked up when he came in. My wife, he said. She just came in. 37 weeks. She was having contractions. Name, Marin Whitlock. Or Marin Rourke. He wasn't sure which she'd used. He realized he didn't know, and the not knowing landed somewhere strange. The nurse checked a screen. She's been taken to labor and delivery. 4th floor. You'll need to check in at the desk up there. They'll let you know if... Thank you, he said. He was already moving. The elevator was slow. He took the stairs. The labor and delivery floor was quieter than the ER in a way that felt deliberate, softer lighting. The sound dampened, everything calibrated toward a different register of urgency. The desk nurse looked at him with the professional assessment of someone who has seen many versions of the man who arrives at L&D at 2 in the morning. "Marin Whitlock," he said. "Are you family?" The question had an answer that was technically complicated and practically simple. "I'm the father," he said. She checked her screen. "She's in room 412. She's stable. The contractions are regular, but her doctor is with her, and it's still early in the process." She looked at him carefully. "You can wait in the family area, or I can ask her if she wants you in the room." "Ask her," he said. The nurse disappeared through a set of double doors. He stood at the desk and looked at the corridor and breathed. His hands were not entirely steady. He put them in his jacket pockets and felt the edge of the flash drive and left it there. The nurse came back. "She says you can wait outside the room." "Not inside yet." She paused. Her sisters were with her. "That's fine," he said. "That's exactly right." He went to 412 and stood in the corridor outside the closed door, side vista. He could hear, very faintly, the sound of Talia's voice, low, steady, the specific voice of a person who talks their way through things, the way other people breathe through them. He couldn't hear Marin. He pressed his shoulder against the wall and slid down it until he was sitting on the floor with his back to the corridor wall, and his jacket still on, and the flash drive still in his pocket. He had never sat on a hospital floor in his life. It was surprisingly comfortable. He called Priest from there. "Where are you?" Priest said. "Hospital. My wife went into labor." A pause. "The evidence." "Sabine Corvell is on her way to you with Dell. She's got the full documentation, and she transmitted a copy to your evidence line 2 hours ago. From a library terminal, your people should already have it." He paused. "And I have my own drive, the one with my records. I'll bring it personally." Another pause. "Tomorrow." "My daughter is being born tonight," Cassian said. "You'll get everything I promised and more. Tomorrow." A long silence. "The 3 individuals we detained at the Whitlock address," Priest said carefully. "They had weapons. Federal charges are moving." Another pause. "Kessero's people." "Yes. He's going to know his operation is exposed by morning." "Then you should find him before morning," Cassian said. "I'd suggest the marina 40 minutes south. Slip 14. There's a boat registered to one of his shells. Ronan Trell used it to connect with him 2 nights ago." Silence. "We'll move on it," Priest said. "Good." Cassian leaned his head back against the wall. "And Priest, when this is over, when you have everything you need from me," he kept his voice level, "I'm not going to run." Another pause longer. "I know," Priest said. It sounded like he meant it. They hung up. Cassian sat on the floor of the 4th-floor corridor of Seattle General Hospital and listened to the building breathe around him. Somewhere behind the closed door of 412, his daughter was in the process of entering the world. Somewhere across the city, federal agents were moving on a marina slip based on his information. Somewhere a man named Lucian Kessero was about to discover that the careful, patient, years-long operation he had constructed to hollow out Cassian Rourke's empire from the inside had instead handed every thread of his own organization to federal investigators. And somewhere in this building, in this specific corridor, the man who had spent 15 years believing that control was the same as safety was sitting on a linoleum floor with nothing left to control and finding that the floor held him up just fine anyway. He sat there for 2 hours and 40 minutes. At 4:17 a.m., the door to 412 opened and Talia came out. She looked down at him on the floor, looked at his face, looked at the corridor both ways, and then sat down next to him with her back against the wall and her legs stretched out in front of her. They sat in silence for a moment. "Is she?" he started. "She's doing what she came here to do," Talia said. "She's fine. The doctor says another couple hours, probably." He nodded. Talia was quiet for a moment. Then Reyes called me. "Casascio was arrested at the marina at 3:40 a.m. She said it without inflection. Ronan was with him. Something moved through Cassian's chest. Not relief exactly, something heavier than relief. Something that had the weight of 16 years in it. Both of them. Both of them. Priest's office issued a statement. "It'll be in the morning papers." She paused. along with Sabine's transmitted documents, apparently. Someone in the federal office leaked to a journalist. By sunrise, Casaro's entire financial structure will be on 3 news websites. Cassian closed his eyes briefly. It's over, Talia said. The external part, he said. She looked at him. Yes, she agreed. The external part. They sat with that. You know, I'm going to make this as clean as possible for her, he said. The divorce. Everything Gideon asks for. I'm not going to fight any of it. I know, Talia said. She should have the penthouse if she wants it. Or its value. Whatever she decides. She won't want the penthouse. No, he said, I didn't think so. Cassian. Talia's voice was different now. Not the attorney's voice. Not the sister's defensive voice. Something straighter. I was wrong about you. Not about the danger of your world or the ways it was bad for her. I wasn't wrong about that. But I thought you didn't actually love her. She paused. I was wrong about that part. He didn't say anything. The way you loved her was wrong, Talia said. The decisions were wrong, the control was wrong, and what she came home to find was... She stopped. But the thing underneath it was real. I want you to know I see that. She paused. Even if she's not in a place to say it to you right now. He looked at the corridor ceiling. She doesn't need to say anything to me. No, Talia agreed. She doesn't. They sat in silence for another few minutes. Then Talia's phone buzzed. She looked at it and stood up, smoothing her jacket with the efficiency of a woman who runs on very little sleep and has learned not to waste the recovery time. Go in, she said. He looked up. She asked. She texted me while I was out here. Talia showed him the screen. 3 words. Send him in. He stood up. His knees were stiff from the floor. He straightened his jacket. He ran one hand through his hair and then stopped, because the version of him that cared about how he looked walking into a room was not the version that was called for here. He pushed the door open. The room was dim and smelled like antiseptic, and something else, something warmer underneath, harder to name. Marin was in the bed with the upper half inclined and her hair loose, something he almost never saw. She looked exhausted in a way that was different from the exhausted of the past 4 days. This was physical, wrung out. The honest fatigue of a body that has been doing the hardest thing it knows how to do. She looked at him when he came in. He crossed the room and stopped at the side of the bed. Kessler was arrested, he said quietly. Ronchas too. It's done. She held his gaze for a moment. Something moved across her face, not triumph, not relief, something quieter than either. Like a window being opened in a room that has been closed for a long time. Good, she said. Then she shifted slightly and winced, and his hand moved toward her instinctively and stopped. Sorry, he said. It's okay. She looked at his hand, still half extended. You can, it's fine. He put his hand over hers on the bed rail. She didn't move it away. They stayed like that through a contraction. He watched her breathe through it. The particular focused internal disappearing of a person managing something that cannot be managed except by enduring it. When it passed, she let out a slow breath, and her hand moved slightly under his, not pulling away, just resettling. I heard what you said, she said, to Priest, on the phone. He waited. That you're not going to run. She was looking at the far wall. That you'll give him everything. Yes. What does everything mean for you? Legally. He was quiet for a moment. It means charges, he said. More than one. We'll negotiate where we can. But there are things I did that don't negotiate away. He kept his voice even. It means time. Probably. She turned her head and looked at him. The look was direct and complicated and didn't ask for anything. I'm not going to pretend that's not what it is, he said. And I'm not going to pretend I did it for you. I did it because it was the only way to actually end this. And because I finally understood that I can't protect my daughter from inside the same machine that made her a target in the first place. Marin was quiet. I know it doesn't fix what happened between us, he said. Nothing fixes that, she said. Simply, not cruelly. I know, but it matters, she said, that you're doing it. It matters for her. She meant the baby, the entirely possible daughter, currently making her intentions known with increasing urgency. A father who made mistakes and then paid for them is better than a father who bought his way out. She'll understand that someday. He looked at their hands on the bed rail. You think she'll understand? I think I'll explain it to her when she's old enough, Marin said. All of it. Honestly. A pause. I'm not going to make you a villain in her story. I'm also not going to make you a hero. She looked at him. I'm going to tell her the truth. That her father was a complicated person who loved her and made serious mistakes and tried to become better than those mistakes. She paused. That's the most honest thing I can give her. He was quiet for a long moment. Thank you, he said. She turned back to the ceiling. Another contraction was building. He could see it in the tension that moved through her body, the breath that shortened. Stay, she said before it hit. He stayed. Leora Rourke was born at 6:51 in the morning. 7 pounds, 3 ounces. A sound that started small and then opened up into something enormous. The first voice Cassian had ever heard that stopped him completely, that emptied him of every other thing and left only this. The doctor put her in Marin's arms first, which was the only right order, and Marin looked down at her with an expression Cassian had never seen on her face before and would spend a long time afterward trying to find words for. It was not wonder exactly, or not only wonder, it was recognition. It was the face of someone who has been waiting for a specific thing without fully knowing what it looked like, and is now looking at it. Hi, Marin said very quietly. Just that. The baby blinked. After a while, Marin looked up. She held Cassian's gaze for a moment across the room. Then she tilted her arms, slightly an adjustment, an offering of angle. He crossed the room and she put Leora into his hands. He had held things carefully before. He had moved through the world with a particular deliberateness about what his hands touched and carried. He had never, until this moment, held something that he understood was the most important thing he would ever hold, and simultaneously the thing over which he had the least claim. He looked at his daughter. She was red-faced and disgruntled, and her eyes were the indeterminate color of all newborns, and she had a small fist pressed against her cheek, and she was entirely, profoundly unimpressed with everything so far. He understood that about her immediately. Leora, he said. She didn't care. He laughed. It came out rough and strange from a place he hadn't accessed in a long time, and he heard Marin make a sound behind it, not quite a laugh. Something softer, and for one strange moment, the room held all three of them in something that was not forgiveness, and was not reconciliation, and was not the undoing of anything that had been done, but was still, somehow, true. Then the nurse came to weigh and measure, and the moment ended the way moments do. He handed Leora back. He stepped out of the room to make a phone call that had been waiting for 6 hours. Priest answered on the first ring. I'll be there in 2 hours, Cassian said, with the drive and everything on it. And I'll give a full statement. I'll have a room ready, Priest said. One condition, Cassian said. You don't get to set conditions. This one you'll give me, Cassian said. Whatever comes next for me, whatever the legal process, looks like my daughter and her mother are not mentioned in any public statement. No names, no connection. They're not part of this narrative. Pause. We were already planning to protect the family's identity, Priest said. We're not animals, Rourke. Good, Cassian said. Then I'll see you in 2 hours. He stood in the corridor outside 412 for one more moment. The morning light was coming through the window at the end of the hall. Seattle morning light in October had a particular quality to it, gray and soft and filtered, the kind of light that doesn't announce itself, just arrives gradually and makes everything legible. He looked at it. Then he went downstairs, found a hospital cafeteria that was just opening, and sat at a corner table with a cup of coffee he didn't particularly want, and a phone full of messages he was going to need to get through before the day was much older. He went through them methodically. His lawyer, Dell with a status report, Reyes with a preliminary assessment of what the night's arrests had done to the remaining security situation. A message from a number he didn't recognize that turned out to be Sabine, sent at 3 a.m., statement given. In federal protection, thank you for the car. I'm sorry for everything. He read it twice and then put the phone face down and drank some of the coffee. He thought about what came next. He had spent 15 years building something. He had watched it, over the past week, begin to come apart, not the way things fall apart when they fail, but the way things come apart when you deliberately dismantle them, because you finally understand they were built wrong. There was a difference between those two experiences, and it mattered that there was a difference. One happened to you, The other was a choice. He had made the choice. What it would cost him was not abstract. He had run the numbers in his head in the early hours outside that delivery room, and the numbers were what they were. Charges, proceedings, likely prison time, though the cooperation and the information he was providing were significant enough to reshape the calculation. His attorney was already talking about it, in terms that were cautious, and not without some room for reduced sentences. There was no version of honest accounting that didn't include consequence. He had known that when he called Priest. He knew it now. He drank his coffee and looked at the cafeteria, filling up around him with hospital workers, on shift change and families, on their way to various floors, and the ordinary population of a building that deals in the most basic human transactions. Beginning and ending, sickness and recovery, the body's insistence on making itself known. He thought about Ronan. This one he was going to carry differently than the rest. The others, the choices he'd made, the control he'd imposed, the secrets he'd kept, those he could build a framework around. Those he could understand as failures of judgment, or failures of love, or failures of imagination about what other people were owed. Ronan was something else. Ronan was the betrayal that had no framework, that sat outside the categories of explicable human failure and required just sitting with the fact of it. 16 years, and Ronan had looked at all of it, the whole thing, the access and the trust, and the dinners and the wedding and the congratulations on the pregnancy, and had decided it was a resource to convert. Cassian didn't spend long on it. There was nothing useful in it. He picked up the phone again and started returning calls. He left the hospital at 9 a.m. He gave Priest everything he had at 10. The interview lasted 4 hours. He answered every question. When he didn't remember a specific date or number, he said so. When the answer incriminated him, he gave it anyway. Priest sat across the table from him, with 2 other investigators and a recording device and Cassian's attorney at his elbow. And for 4 hours, Cassian Rourke told the truth about what he had built and what it had cost and what he knew about the man who had spent 3 years trying to take it from him. When it was done, Priest walked him to the elevator. "Rourke," he said. Cassian turned. "It took a certain kind of nerve to make that call," Priest said. "I've been doing this a long time. Most people in your position, they wait until there's no other option. They wait until we're already at the door." He paused. "You called first." Cassian considered this. "I had a daughter born this morning," he said. "It adjusts the math." Priest nodded once. "Congratulations," he said. It sounded like he meant it. The elevator came. Cassian wrote it down. The charges came 3 weeks later, which was faster than his attorney had expected, and slower than the press coverage had prepared the city for. There were 4 counts. His attorney negotiated hard on 2 of them. The plea agreement that eventually emerged was the product of 40 days of careful legal work and the weight of the information Cassian had provided, which had resulted in 47 charges against Kessero's organization across 3 states and the dismantling of a financial network that had been operating for 11 years. The judge reviewed the cooperation extensively. Cassian served time. It was not a short stretch. It was also not the longest version of what it could have been. He did not fight it. He did not appeal the elements that were fair. He arranged his legitimate businesses into independent oversight structures that his attorney built over the months between the plea and the sentencing, and he signed over the operational authority to managers who did not have his history and could therefore have a future that his companies could attach themselves to. He was sitting in his attorney's office the day the last transfer was finalized when his phone buzzed. A photograph from Talia. Leora at 2 months, in the kitchen of a house Marin had rented near the water, lying on a yellow blanket with her arms extended in the starfish position of a baby who has just discovered that she can make her limbs go where she puts them. Her expression was the same one she'd had in the hospital, entirely unimpressed with everything, evaluating, taking inventory of a world that had not yet explained itself to her satisfaction. He looked at the photograph for a long time. Then he sent back a single word, "Beautiful." Talia replied, "She has your eyebrows." Marin is furious about it. He laughed in his attorney's office, alone, the same rough sound from the delivery room. He carried the photograph inside his phone through everything that followed. The divorce was finalized in February. Marin did not want the penthouse. She wanted the joint account's liquid value, which Cassian's attorney transferred in full without discussion, and she wanted a legally binding schedule for Leora's time, with her father built around realistic access rather than performed generosity. Gideon Shaw drew up the custody framework with the kind of specificity that left nothing to later interpretation, and both of them signed it in offices on opposite sides of the building on the same morning, which was as close as they came to being in the same room for the finalization. Marin walked out of the building into a February morning that was cold and clear and smelled like salt water coming in off the sound. She stood on the sidewalk. She put her face up to the sky, which was the pale blue of early winter, and breathed in once, slowly. Then she called Talia. "Done?" Talia asked. "Done," she said. "How do you feel?" She thought about it. The honest answer was complicated and layered, and had no single word. "Like myself," she said finally. "Like I've been slowly getting back to being myself for 4 months, and I just finished." Talia was quiet for a moment. "Good," she said. "Now come home." Leora ate an entire container of pureed sweet potato, and I need a witness. Marin laughed and went to get her daughter. The house she'd rented near the water was modest, in a way that was not a compromise but a choice small rooms, a kitchen that got morning light, a garden in the back that was currently just frost-hardened dirt but would be something else in spring. She had furnished it slowly and deliberately, buying things because she liked them rather than because they completed a set, which was a different relationship with the physical world than she'd had in the penthouse, and felt accurate to who she was. She went back to the literacy program. Not to the same community center, she moved it to a space she rented herself, a converted storefront 2 blocks from the water, and rebuilt the volunteer roster from scratch. She hired a part-time coordinator, a young woman named Deja, who had the specific gift of remembering every child's name and which books they'd previously said they hated, and finding the one book that would make them liars. The program grew. It grew because Marin worked at it with the focused, unspectacular consistency of someone who has stopped waiting for their real life to begin, and understood that this was it. This had always been it. The rooms full of children who were learning that words could belong to them too. Leora came to the program sometimes, propped in a carrier against Marin's chest, and the children would crowd around and look at her with the solemn fascination children bring to things they're not sure how to categorize. "What's her name?" a 7-year-old named Marcus asked one afternoon. "Leora," Marin said. "That's a book name," he said. "It is," Marin agreed. He considered this seriously. "Okay," he said, and went back to his book. Cassian called on the schedule. Every call on time, without the performance of someone trying to demonstrate reliability, but with the plain consistency of someone who had decided this was what he was doing and was doing it. He asked about Leora first, and then about Marin, not the way he'd asked before, not the managing way, not the monitoring way, but the way you ask about someone you care about and don't have the right to know more about than they tell you. Marin told him what she decided to tell him. It was less than before and more honest than before. She told him Leora was laughing now. He went quiet on the phone when she said that. "What does it sound like?" he said. "Like someone who doesn't believe anything is permanent yet," she said. Pure, completely unself-conscious laughter. "I can't wait to hear it," he said. "You will," she said. At the visit, she meant it. He came for his first proper visit in the spring, on a Thursday morning that was overcast and mild, the kind of Seattle morning that doesn't decide on weather and so gives you all of them at once. Marin opened the front door when she heard the car and watched him come up the walk. He looked different. Not broken, Cassian Rourke was constitutionally unable to look broken in the conventional sense. But something in him had settled. The controlled energy quality she'd spent 3 years calibrating her own movements around was different now, less like a compressed thing and more like a resolved one. Like a fist that has finally opened. He stopped at the bottom of the porch steps. "Hi," he said. "Hi," she said. A beat. "She's in the back," Marin said. "In the garden. She's not walking yet, but she's figured out crawling, and she has feelings about the dirt." Something moved across his face that was entirely unguarded. Yeah. Marin held the door open. Come in. He came in. The house was warm and smelled like coffee and whatever Talia had left in the kitchen when she'd been here earlier. He moved through it with the careful awareness of someone entering a space that belongs to someone else, which was its own particular change from a man who had always moved through rooms as though they were already his. Marin walked him through the house and out the back door into the garden. Leora was on a blanket on the grass, examining a small smooth stone with the full concentration of someone for whom all objects are still mysteries worth taking seriously. She was 7 months old and had Marin's coloring and Cassian's particular quality of taking in a room before deciding what she thought about it. She looked up when the door opened. She looked at Cassian. He crouched down at the edge of the blanket, slow and careful, so he wasn't looming. He was at her level. He didn't reach for her. He waited. Leora looked at him for a long moment. This person she had met exactly once, in a room she didn't remember. Under circumstances, her nervous system might have recorded in ways her memory hadn't. She looked at him with the total, unself-conscious assessment of a person who has not yet learned to pretend. Then she held out the stone, offering it. The way babies offer things not as a gift exactly, but as a sharing of what matters. This is what I have, and I am showing you what I found. Cassian's hand came forward, and she placed the stone in it with great seriousness. He looked at the stone. Thank you, he said, quietly. To her. She made a sound that was not yet a word, but was clearly an agreement. Marin stood at the back door with her arms crossed over her chest, watching, and felt something move through her that she wasn't going to perform or name out loud, but that she was going to keep. Some things you don't say, because saying them changes their shape, and they need to stay the shape they are. She went back inside and let them have a few minutes. She put the kettle on. She looked out the kitchen window at the two of them, her daughter and her former husband, at the picture they made in the gray April light, the large man in the small garden, sitting cross-legged now on the edge of the blanket with a stone in his hand, and a 7-month-old examining him with the focused seriousness of someone filing information. She looked at it until the kettle boiled. Then she turned away and made the tea. Later, after Cassian left and Leora was down for her afternoon nap, Marin sat at the kitchen table with her notebook. The book had been beginning itself in her head for months, in the nights after the divorce was filed, in the long hours at the literacy program, in the specific quiet of being a person who has been through something and is still in the process of understanding what it was. She had written pieces of it in the margins of other things, fragments in her phone, a paragraph at 2 a.m. that she'd come back to the next morning and found was good, which surprised her. She opened the notebook and wrote at the top of a clean page, "The things we agree to not know." She sat with that for a moment. Then she started writing. Not about Cassian, not about the bedroom or the elevator or the drive in the rain. She wrote about choice, the ones that look like love and aren't, the ones that look like weakness and aren't that either. She wrote about the particular exhaustion of living inside someone else's story of you and the specific muscular effort required to start writing your own. She wrote for an hour without stopping, and it was the best hour she'd had in a long time. The book would take 2 years. It would not be a memoir, exactly too specific in some places, and too universal in others to be contained by that word. It would not name names or describe events that were identifiable to the people who had lived them. It would be, as a review would eventually say, in terms that surprised her by being accurate, the work of someone who went through fire and came back with a more precise understanding of what fire is. She didn't think about any of that while she was writing it. She just wrote. Outside the garden was gray and damp, and the climbing rose on the back fence had put out its first small leaves of the season, very green, very new, with the slightly desperate quality of everything that grows back after winter. She'd noticed it that morning, and then forgotten it, and now she looked at it through the window and noticed it again. She hadn't planted it. It had been there when she rented the house. Someone else's rose, coming back, because that's what roses do. She looked at it for a moment. Then she looked back at her notebook. She found her place on the page and kept writing. Past the way, years do not smoothly, not in a line, but in the lurching, nonlinear way that actual time moves, in which some weeks are entire eras, and some months leave no mark, and the person you are at the end of a year is recognizably the same as the person you were at the beginning, but differently weighted, differently arranged. Leora grew. She was a specific child, not easy and not difficult, but particular, with opinions that arrived early and stated themselves plainly and could not be reasoned away without first being taken seriously, which meant she required a certain quality of attention that Marin found exhausting and wonderful in equal measure. She had a sound she made when something delighted her that was still, at 4 years old, the closest thing Marin knew to pure joy. Cassian came for his visits, on time, every time. He brought nothing excessive books sometimes. Once a carved wooden puzzle that Leora disassembled and lost pieces of immediately and remained attached to, despite its incompleteness, which seemed right. He did not try to be the parent who arrived with the larger gift. He arrived and sat on the floor and paid attention, which turned out to be what she wanted. Marin watched this without comment. She served the sentence of the divorce without bitterness, which took a specific kind of daily maintenance that she didn't always achieve perfectly, and that she extended to herself the same non-perfectionism she extended to her daughter. You try again tomorrow. That's all. She did not miss him in the way she'd feared she would. She missed, sometimes, the version of him that had been possible, the person she had believed could be, before she understood the cost of that belief. She mourned that person in private the way you mourn things that never entirely existed. She stopped mourning them, then she stopped mourning them, and found that on the other side of the mourning was something clearer. Talia visited every Sunday. This was not planned. It just became true, and then it was simply how Sundays were, which was one of the better things that had come out of the worst year. One spring afternoon, Leora was 4. The garden was actually a garden now. Marin had planted things, and they had grown. Cassian came for a visit. He'd been released 8 months ago. The time had done what time does, marked him in some ways, clarified him in others. He was quieter than the version she'd married. He listened more than he talked. He had started, apparently, volunteering with a legal aid organization that helped first-time offenders navigate financial restitution, which Talia had told her with the careful neutrality of someone conveying information without editorializing, though her face had done something complicated when she said it. He came through the side gate, the way he always did now, and found Marin sitting on the back step with a cup of coffee, watching Leora attempt to climb the low stone wall at the far end of the garden. Stopped at the gate. Marin looked at him. She tilted her head slightly toward the garden. He came in and stood at the edge of the grass. Leora had her tongue slightly out, the way she had when concentrating, and both hands flat on the top of the wall, and she was trying to find purchase for her right knee. She hadn't noticed Cassian yet, or she had noticed him and had filed it and returned to the more important task. Marin watched Cassian watch Leora. She saw the exact moment he understood that she was going to try to climb it. She saw the impulse move through him. She knew that impulse from 3 years of marriage, the specific motion that preceded him, solving a problem she hadn't asked him to solve, and she watched him hold it. He didn't move. His hands stayed at his sides. He took one step closer, just close enough to catch. Leora got her knee up. She got her foot under her. She pulled herself to the top of the wall and sat there for one triumphant second, and then lost her balance and came off the side, and Cassian moved before she hit the ground, not dramatically. Just there, one arm catching her weight easily, setting her on her feet with the practiced catch of a man who had been paying the kind of attention that prepares you. Leora looked at him. "I almost did it," she said. A statement of record. "You got to the top," he said. She considered this evaluation. Found it accurate. "I'm going to do it again," she said. "Okay," he said. She went back to the wall. Marin watched Cassian straighten up and find his distance again, close enough to catch, far enough to let her try. She felt something move through her that was not what she'd felt for him before, not the old thing, not the thing that had existed inside a story she no longer lived in. It was something adjacent but different. The feeling of seeing a person accurately, without the additions of what you wanted them to be, or the subtractions of what they'd cost you. He looked over. She didn't look away. He sat down in the grass a few feet from where she was sitting. They watched their daughter attempt the wall. She slipped again. Got up, tried again, slipped. The sounds she made were not discouraged. They were the sounds of some filing information and adjusting. "She's going to get it," Cassian said quietly. "She's been at it for 20 minutes, Marin said. She'll get it when she gets it." He nodded. A pause. "How's the book?" he said. "Almost done. Publisher wants it in October." "That's soon, it is." She looked at her coffee cup. Strange. Writing about it made it smaller, in the right way. He was quiet for a moment. "Good," he said. It came out plain, and without the performance of meaning more than it said, and she registered it that way. Leora reached the top of the wall. This time she found her balance. She stood on it for a full second with both arms thrown up, and her face turned awry, and made a sound that was still, after 4 years, the closest thing to pure joy that Marin knew. Cassian laughed. The rough sound from the delivery room. The same one. Marin laughed with him. It came out of her easily, which surprised her, and then didn't. Leora looked down at both of them from her wall, and her expression contained the particular wisdom of a 4-year-old who has just accomplished something and found that the important people were watching. "I did it," she told them, with great seriousness. "You did it," Marin said. "We saw," Cassian said. Leora looked at her wall, then back at them. Then she climbed carefully down and walked to the middle of the garden and sat in the grass and began examining a dandelion with the same focused seriousness she'd given the stone 4 years ago. Marin looked at the garden. She looked at her daughter in the middle of it, entirely occupied with a weed. She looked at the man, sitting a few feet away, who had broken something large and was in the long, non-dramatic work of building something smaller and more honest from what survived. Nothing that had broken had been restored. She didn't want it restored. She wanted what she had: this house near the water, this garden that was actually hers. This child, who threw her arms at the sky and counted her victories with complete seriousness, and examined weeds with the attention she gave to stones, and both with the full weight of herself, because she hadn't yet learned to give less than that. She wanted the book she was finishing, and the program that was growing, and Sundays with Talia, and the particular quality of a life that she had chosen, piece by piece, starting from a rainy October night when she had walked into an elevator and let the doors close and decided that whatever came next would belong to her. It had. All of it, the hard parts and the quiet parts and the parts she hadn't expected, belonged to her. She finished her coffee. The afternoon light shifted, doing the thing Seattle light did in spring, where it arrived sideways through the clouds and turned everything briefly gold. Leora held up the dandelion toward the light. It was just a weed. She looked at it like it was everything.